Hello and welcome to another Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. Today's a little bit different. One of my subscribers contacted me via email and asked if he could send me a model. His name is Steve Burrows, and he says that of this model, I found it under a load of muck in the middle of a forest behind my house in Newport, Wales. Well, what it is a Matchbox number 6C Quarry truck. And these were built in 1964. And as you can see, being buried in a forest was not very kind to this model, as it is completely rusted underneath. All the axles are rotten, the wheels won't even turn, and it is covered in chips and missing paint. So I can't wait to get stuck into this. There's even a gouge at the top there, a little bit of deformation of the lip of the tray there. So, I'm going to get straight into it. First up, I'm going to remove the wheels. Now that sounds quite simple, but in this case it was very difficult. The axles were completely rusted, and as some of you may know, when metal rusts, it expands and takes up more space. That's why concrete cracks, for example, when the Rio expands inside of it. So what's happened is these axles have expanded and they have locked the wheels into position, and they've also locked themselves into the axle supports on the chassis of the model. And I'm having a hell of a time trying to remove them, as you can see from this footage. Here I'm attempting to push the cut axle out using the nose of some long nose pliers, but it is not working. Now I'm just using brute force and bang, that's one wheel off, but the axle's still attached to it. So who knows how I'm going to get that out. I've never faced this problem before. So I reached for the WD-40, which supposedly loosens rusted metals. So what I do is I absolutely saturate the model with it and leave it for a couple of hours, hoping that it's going to provide a miracle cure for this stubborn model. So here I am, I've come back after a couple of hours, and I'm giving it a bit of a fiddle here, and what happened there is one of the wheels just broke in half, like completely snapped straight across the centre. These are coming loose. Oh, there you go, they've come off. But again, they're all breaking. What's going on? This model's got 10 wheels, and if I end up breaking them all, it's going to cost me a lot of money to replace them. So I'm trying to go easy here and use a little bit of tact with them. Oh, there's another one gone. There's the stub of a rusty axle out, but I don't think that's going to be much use to me. Here's another one. Here's another broken wheel. Half of it's still clinging on. That's got it. So there's a few here broken. I've got two here. Might be able to reuse them, but they probably break as soon as I touch them again. Anyway, here's all the wheels off, and what happened was I cannot get this pin out. That's the pivot pin for the tipper body on the back. So I'm using a Dremel with a cutting disc on it, and I'm trying to cut the end off to enable me to drift it out with a small pin here. Give it a bit of a pull there. So that's the pin out, but in the process of doing so, one of the axle supports at the rear there on the left of the model broke off. Here's the rotten axles. They're going straight in the bin. And all I could manage to keep is 4 wheels that they're still cracked, so they're not the best. What I should do is just buy a whole new set of new ones. Here's the bit that broke off. So I'm going to try and attach that back on there, because I need to, of course, to put the axle back in. And here is the tipper pivot point. And as you can see, one of those snapped off as well, because this thing was so rusty. Yeah, something had to give. Anyway, all these wheels that were broken, I've cleaned them up, and I thought they're actually not that bad, except that they're split in half. So using some watery type super glue here, I'm giving it a go to glue them together, and I'm holding them together with these pegs because that's perfect for wheels. As you can see, that little cutout in the peg. Look at that. So I'm gluing them all together, and I'm going to see how many of them I can maybe get away with reusing. So here they are. The ones at the top right were beyond repair. Anyway, the axles. To make the new axles, I'm going to be using pop rivets, as I've tried in another video of mine, and it worked quite well. I've got some new wheels and some old wheels that I've repaired. So when I put it back together, I'm going to make sure that the old wheels, no, in this instance, the new wheel goes on first, then the old wheel, so that the old wheel is on the inside of the model and can't be seen. See? And now on this side, I'm putting the old wheel on first, followed by the new wheel. So hopefully the end result will look as though it's a brand new model with all new wheels on it. Now I'm sick of paying top dollar for paint stripper, so I've made my own brand, Marty's magnificent money-saving paint stripper, and it's super strong. It's got some secret ingredients in this, and I'm going to be selling it on eBay when I've perfected the recipe. This is the first time I'm using it, so I've gone out and bought a brand new brush to celebrate, and what I'm going to be showing you is how quickly it's going to strip the paint off of these model parts, and I think you'll be quite amazed. Remember, it is super strength. So once again, here's my solution, and I'm going to apply it to the model. Oh dear, that wasn't supposed to happen. Maybe I made it a little bit too strong. So I shall go back to my standard product, the poly stripper. Anyway, here we go. Using a paintbrush, put it on, slap it on all over. And as usual, bring in the water and scrape it off with a toothbrush. Don't forget, this model has been buried in the ground for, it could have been, who knows, up to 50 years. Again, I thank Steve Burrows for sending it to me. So I've had to try and drill out the front axles because they were totally rusted in, and in doing so, the drill press has gone off centre and caused an oval hole, which I'm going to have to fix. Here I am trying to remove the remnants of the paint. Not all of it comes off the paint stripper, maybe 90%. So I use wire wool and a wire brush in my drill, just to try and get it back down to the bare metal. You can look at the oxidation on this model too. I've never seen it quite as bad as this. Now I'm going to address this oval hole here. I was humming and hawing about it, and I finally decided to attempt to try and fill it with some solder and then re-drill it. So this side goes beautifully smooth. Basically just touch it with the solder and the hole's filled. This side was a little bit more time consuming. I'm not too sure why. Maybe the soldering iron unplugged itself or something, I don't know. But it took me a very long time to get some solder in. Now it looks a bit ugly. Once it's cleaned up and painted, you won't even know. This is what it looks like before I drill it, and this is what it looks like after I drill it. This is me just doing a test fit of the pop rivet axle, just to make sure it goes through the hole. Now I'm going to try and repair this broken piece and fix it back onto the back of the truck, using the old baking powder and super glue trick, as featured in some of my other videos. First off, I'm using some super glue gel to hold the broken part into position to enable me to fix it permanently. So once I'm happy with it in the correct position, I go ahead and start using the liquid super glue and a pinch of baking soda. The baking soda and the liquid super glue react almost instantly and form a very strong chemical bond. There's also minimal sanding required. I'm using a small file here just to remove the excess product from the chassis of the model. That looks quite neat. Next, I'm attempting to replicate the hoop on the rear of the truck through which the tipper body pivot pin goes. After I've made a large blob of superglue and baking soda, I drill a hole through the centre of it. Next, using some small files, I form the outer edge into shape. Still need to do some more work on this one. That's fairly close now though. I'm just doing a test fit of the tipper tray using one of the rivet tails that I'm going to use as a pivot pin. That seems to work quite well. I'm happy with that. When I first looked at this model, I noticed there was a gouge on the top of the front there, and also a indentation in the lip of the tipper tray. So I'm going to fix that up with some model filler. Just going to spread it on with a sharp knife, very light coat, and sand it down, and hopefully make this damage invisible to the naked eye. I've deliberately put some excess product on the front there so that I have some material to reshape to try and replicate the original profile of the front lip. After a little bit of sanding with some very fine emery paper, this is what it looks like. Right, I'm going to give the model a very light coat of Tamiya fine undercoat to make it ready for painting. I'm using these surgical forceps to hold the items. They come in quite handy. Here's a close-up of some of the detail on this model. It's actually not one of the best. The detail is very limited. There's a radiator grille and a few engine components on display, door handles and a step for the driver to get into the cabin. There underneath we can see number 6. To freshen up the wheels and make the old and the new ones look the same, I'm using some Tamiya X1, which is gloss black, and I'm going to thin it with some thinners and make basically a black wash that I'm just going to paint the wheels with. It'll just make them look a little bit nicer. I'm doing this on one of my homemade disposable work mats. After painting the other side and the wheels are dry, I will put them in a container so they don't get lost, and then I will throw away my disposable work mat into the bin where all the rubbish goes. Great, now it's time to paint the truck. I'm painting it this rather drab yellow colour. that is typical of quarry trucks that you see in movies and driving around in quarries. I'm using Mr. Hobby acrylics. They're water-based paint. To mix this colour up I used off-white, yellow and creamy yellow. A lot of people have asked me what brand of spray gun do I use, and also what sort of compressor do I use. Well, I've inspected my spray gun under a magnifying glass and it has absolutely no markings on it whatsoever, so unfortunately I can't answer that one. The compressor, however, does have a brand on it. It's a GS and the model number is an AS186 and it has a 3-litre air tank on it. So there's a little bit of information for those that wanted to know. When the paint is dry, I give the model a quick coat of Mr. Hobby Gloss Top Coat, and this is what it looks like. I'm going to now start reassembling the model. First of all, I'm going to put the tip tray back on the truck. I'm going to cut a small section of this tubular valve out and use it in conjunction with 2 ends off of pop rivet tails. I'm then going to glue it all together in situ to make a small pivot post on which the rear tray of the truck will pivot. To cut everything to length, I'm using a small rotary cutting blade held in the chuck of my battery drill. This piece is the centre section of the pivot post. Now to make the ends from the pop rivet tails. I'm just cutting the ends off and I shall be gluing these into the tubular section. When I cut the ends off, I collect them on the magnet below the vise. That way I don't lose them. This is me doing a test fit to ensure that I've cut everything to the correct length before I go ahead and glue it all together. I think that will look good. But before I put the back section on, I've got to refit the wheels to the truck. I use my drill press and 2 modified nails to do this, details of which can be found in some of my other videos. I call it Marty's method. Okay, now it's time to put the back on. It's a bit fiddly and time consuming, but once it's done, all that I need to do is hand paint a few details on the model to finish it off. Some people ask me what brand of silver paint do I use to paint the details. Well, I actually use ink, and it comes out of one of these Pentel pens. And here's a picture of the type of brush that I use to paint the very fine details. Here's a quick reminder of what this model first looked like when I got my hands on it. And this is what it looks like now. So let's talk a little bit about this model. Remember, it was built in 1964, and that makes it 54 years old. It was also found buried in a forest in Wales. It may not look perfect, but I think you'll agree it's a hell of a lot better than what it was. And now it's time to send it back to the quarries, where it can feel at home with its other quarry truck mates. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. What the f*** is going on with this shit? Outtake.